All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. If it feels like Groundhog's Day today, it's because it is, and it's because you were at yesterday's training. If you were there yesterday for the training, we're going to go over the exact same information. So please, take the morning off, get yourself a cup of coffee. It's going to cover the exact same stuff, so no need to do it twice. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Daniel Ramos. I'm the county's budget director. Thank you for joining us this morning, and thank you in advance for participating in the process. We're here to talk about some of the update, the process, the calendar, and some of the updates to the budget process for this year. And why don't we go ahead and get started? So, next slide, please, Paul. So, I often get the question, why do we have like such a complicated budget process? Why do you ask us so many questions? We know how to manage money. Why don't, just leave us alone? So the reason for it is, because of some of the factors outside of our control, because of Commissioner's Court's commitment to pay parity across the county, we have a budget deficit. And because of that, we have to ask you all to figure out ways to bridge the gap. So from our CLSS forecast, so that's the current level of service and spending, and based on our revenue projection, if we were to default to the no new revenue rate, which is essentially the lowest rate if Commissioner's Court can't agree to a tax rate, we'd be in a $215 million deficit. And if we go to the highest tax rate allowable under law, we would have an $87 million deficit. So for those of you who didn't watch Commissioner's Court did ask all departments or all eligible departments to submit an 8% cut. So again, I want to be clear, this does not mean that every department is going to take an 8% cut. What it means is we're asking for 8% worth of options for us and Commissioner's Court to evaluate. Some quick, I skipped over the housekeeping stuff. If folks have questions, please drop them in the chat or come off of mute, raise your hand. We'll be happy to answer them. If you have a department-specific question, I would ask you guys to hold that till the end. I'll stay on, my staff will stay on for any of those kind of, hey, I have this unique situation in my department. We'll be there to answer those. But for now, I just ask if you think your question is pertinent to other departments, go ahead and jump in. But if it's something very specific to you, a specific type of special revenue you get or a grant that's unique to your department, just hold those questions for now. Is Boomin on, or should I keep going?
Okay.
All right. I'm going to turn it over to Boomin, who's going to walk through, the calendar and the process and some of the updates. Again, thank you all for your time today, and I appreciate your patience for the next few months as we get through this budget cycle.
Thanks, Daniel. Paul, you can go to the next slide. So before we get into the budget process, I'm going to just quickly give you a quick run of the show. So Daniel walked through the CLS process. I'm going to walk you through the high-level budget process. We're going to go through the timeline, and then we're going to do going to explain the criteria that we have to evaluate the service enhancement requests and the budget offsets, and we'll give a couple of examples along the way. And then we're going to talk to you about a new step that we'll be doing this year as well. But before I go into this slide, the one thing that I would mention is that if you've done the budget process in prior years, I would say materially there isn't a lot of changes from the department's perspective. There are some changes from our side that we are doing at the request of Commissioner's Court and the staff to help them through the evaluation process. And we're going to go through a lot of that today so that you have a better sense of understanding of when you make your submissions, what's the thought process and the evaluation criteria that's the lens that the court offices will be looking at these items that you guys submit through. So with that, the overall process is this, right? We've gone through the CLS process on May 14th. It's going to be reviewed and ideally approved by Commissioner's Court, and that will set the baseline. The thing that's different this year is that typically that happens before the budget process is kicked off, but just because of the way the court deadlines fell and when the financials became available, Court has already approved what that offset percentage number is, 8%, which we'll talk about a little bit more. And then Court isn't going to approve the actual final CLS numbers until May 14th. Now, with that said, we are working with court offices, and so we do have a number for you today for your actual CLS budget and your target, your 8% target. But just know that it is a kind of placeholder number. While we don't expect any material shifts to take place, there will be some minor changes over the next week or so that we'll communicate to you guys. But that is just a slightly different process this year, just because of the calendar. So CLS will be approved on May 14th, and with that, we'll have a baseline that you guys can work with. One thing that is a little bit also different is that, in 2 courts ago, we had the ARPA items that were approved at court, which was included in the base CLS budget. Now, I do want to call out for you that if you have any grant funding that isn't going to be renewed for fiscal year 27, that should be included and submitted as part of the service enhancement request for court's consideration. The second point there is just highlighting the 2 processes that we have to run. The part that you guys are really focused in on, the service enhancements, that's an optional feature, but it's the things that you guys are looking for as an enhancement to the programs or services that you guys offer to their county constituents. And then the budget offsets, which is a mandatory exercise that court requires. And as Daniel mentioned, remember that this is just to help court offices get an understanding of the menu of options that they have to consider from, but it doesn't mean that it will be cut. The service enhancement request, there are going to be 5, it is a maximum of 5 submissions that are allowed. Departments can submit no more than 3 that are not aligned with the FY27 priorities. And we actually have 2 slides later in this presentation. I won't read it to you, but I'll show you what they are so you have it as for reference, the set of priorities that we have that Commissioners Court has established. And the last is the offset percentage. So it's an 8% offset. So it's 92% of your CLS budget. So my team will transmit the percentages to you, to the CFOs and the budget managers via email. But also I want to make sure it's super clear that you will also have access to it if you weren't included on that email access, because people change and there's turnover and people at different have access to it. We are going to include that CLS budget number as well as your offset dollar target in the OMB website, where you access your 3442s. This is where you access your FTE information if you're looking to make budget changes, classification, salary changes, and whatnot. So you guys should be quite familiar with those. But if you don't know where that is, please reach out to your budget liaison and they can give you the link for that. But the information is in there as of right now. As I'll just mention to you again that because court hasn't finally officially approved it, that a CLS budget gets approval happens on May 14th. Just note that there could be potential changes as a result of that court date, and we will communicate those out to you and update that folder respectively. All right, with that said, we can get into the timeline. I won't skip over the stuff that's already happened, but as I mentioned, May 14th, Commissioners Court approves the CLS budget. Next is in mid-June. If there are any material updates, for example, if there's any state mandates or legislative action that's been taken that requires us to make any adjustments to CLS, that also happens there in mid-June. The other thing that's really important on here is on the bottom there in the middle, department budget hearings. That happens July 13th through 16th. That is materially different from last year in terms of timing. We always had budget hearings, but they've always happened the day of the Labor Day weekend, so it's not really until September time. So the department budget hearings are moved up to the 13th to 16th of July, and that is at the request of court offices because they really do want an opportunity to hear your perspective at the court, at the dais, and to get a better understanding of what it is you are looking for in terms of service enhancements and better understand your offsets and how you're thinking through that criteria. June through August is something that the budget town halls that gets held at the Commissioner Precinct's offices. Next is August 17th is where we get the official tax rates and proposed budgets. That's the kind of starting line of the budget process where they'll get a full breakdown of what a potential budget could look like. And at that point, they'll start amending it and start thinking of different options. And that's September 8th, where they will look at the proposed budget and start considering all their amendments and propose all their potential amendments. And then the last is September 17th, where it's the final approval of the budget and the adoption. So the kind of key dates I'd walk away from here is the July 13th through 16th. That's really critical for the departments because that will be the budget hearings where you'll come to court, and if you've been selected, there's already been a time slot provided to the department head and then you'll speak to service enhancement requests as well as offsets and basically help answer questions from commissioner precinct offices. And then I think that's probably the most critical data on here. So next, let's get into the service enhancement requests. As I mentioned, it's max of up to 5 submissions, and then 3 that are not closely associated with an FY27 priority. So OMB and OCA are only going to assess the service enhancement requests that are closely associated with a priority. So slide 9 and 10 in this presentation will walk you through what that evaluation criteria looks like. And then just a small exception is that if there are service enhancement requests that are being put forth because of a new statutory mandate, or if it's something time sensitive or critical because it's election related or something to that degree, then we will make an assessment. How does OCA look at the service enhancement request and ensure that they are tied to an FY27 priority? I will go back a little bit here. And over the past 2 years, there's been phase 1 and phase 2 that almost every single department has been included in that process, where departments have gone through and filled out a PSIC form, which is effectively kind of a granular level of detail between each one of the programs and services that's offered under each department, and provided a kind of explanation of what that service offering is and how it ties to the priority, to all the initiatives that have been listed in the strategic plan. So that will help. Now, I do want to call out something specific, is that even though a service may not be closely tied to a priority initiative, if a service enhancement request is tied to a initiative or priority item, it does get evaluated. So service enhancement requests that have been determined that are connected to the criteria will be evaluated. And the next 2 slides, so Paul, you can go next. These are the priorities. So there are 2 kind of categories. There's the strategic initiatives. So these are items that are directly pulled out of the 5-year of the strategic plan. And then the next slide will list out the operational imperatives. So this is not part of the strategic plan, but these are items that court has identified as operational imperatives. So the court has defined them as critical and essential for fiscal year 27. So if your service enhancement request ties into one of these 2 categories, strategic initiatives or operational imperatives, they go through the evaluation process. And then also in addition to that, if there's an exception. All right, so next, Paul. So how do the service enhancement requests get evaluated? So there's 2 really sets of criteria. One is the OMB portion, and then the second is the OCA evaluation criteria, and OMB and OCA evaluation criteria. So the first is the budget reasonableness of the enhancement request. Now, if you guys have gone through the budget process, this part is pretty familiar to you guys. The criteria hasn't materially changed. There's probably just 2 new questions in here that we look at when we go through the evaluation process. So one is, are the assumptions based on historical spending? So if you guys have consistently provided service and you're looking to add on 1 person, then we just need to know if that what the cost and benefits and salaries and benefits associated with that person is, and is that make sense? Is it in line with the rest of your staff? Making sure that you're not hiring a new staff person and then giving them 2x the salary. Is the budget request aligned with the budget assumptions provide? Now, one of the things you guys submit through and you submit your service enhancement request last year was, what's the unit cost plus the number of items you require? So oftentimes if it's a labor request, it is, I need 3 FTEs and each FTE costs $100,000 with salaries and benefits, so I should add up to $300,000. That's the type of kind of simple math that we're looking for to make sure that it logically makes sense. Are the staffing levels appropriate with the workload? If you're saying you're going to process X thousand or more transactions and you need you need 1 person to do it, great, that makes sense. We just look to make sure we work with the departments to answer that question to see if that workload really makes sense for the ask of the dollar amount. This one is new, the next one. Can the department absorb the proposed cost within its existing budget allocation? This is something that is a question that was also asked during the CLSS process. It's something that court offices have really honed in on in terms of asking the question of, if there is additional service enhancement required, if there's going to be additional services provided to Harris County constituents or an internal stakeholder, then is there room or capacity within the existing staff to absorb it? Now, it's not simply just taking on more work, but is there a way to creatively shift some of the work around to create capacity to absorb that body of work? Has the department accurately captured recurring versus one-time expenses? There's often times where we're starting a new initiative. There is a ramp-up cost, and then there's a run rate cost, so steady state. What does it look like? And we want to make sure that when we put in the budget request, we want to make sure that any one-time cost is really exclusively called out, so we know what the regular run rate is without that one-time cost to just get set up. Does the request include costs that should be capitalized or charged to another fund? If it is, and sometimes if we need like new software and we're creating new software, there's an implementation cost that often can be capitalized depending on a different set of criteria. So we'll work with my team will work with your teams to figure out if there's any one of these service enhancement requests that has a potential to be used to use one of our capital funds. For those of you who don't know, just like the 10,000 version of it is that typically everything we talk about in this is our operating budget. Now, there are things when we're building an asset or purchasing an asset, we have a separate bucket of funds called capital funds that we can use. And that is basically, that's what this point is addressing. And that requires us to build something. So if there's anything like that that you think might fit that criteria, please work with your budget liaison and we can help you determine if that you can use a separate set of funds for it. Wait, next. This is the second step of that evaluation criteria, assessment of the service enhancement request. So one of the things that court offices have asked us for is helping them to determine, this is one of the evaluation criteria to figure out what is the quality of the submission. Now, this is things that we've always looked for. This is just helping to break it down in kind of a clear, transparent way for the departments. So let's go through the list. Defining a critical, timely problem or need. Really, we're looking to make sure that this really ties into something that's really critical and essential for fiscal year 27, and it's not something that could be delayed for future years or maybe even spread out over multiple years. Demonstrates how the problem or need will be addressed. We want to make sure that when we see the submissions, it's very clear not only what the problem is, but how you're specifically going to solve it. Not just, we're going to figure out a way. The service enhancement request has to have a clear line of path to a solution. Including performance measures. That's something also that's been a key focus for court offices as well. After we've created a solution, how do we track and measure that we are consistently doing it and doing it well, so that if that performance measure is falling off, we know that we need to take action against it. Because court offices are really honed in on the final outcome, and to make sure that the county and the constituents or internal stakeholders are really truly benefiting. And so we're going to be looking at the performance measures quite a bit more closely. Likely to significantly improve how the department serves resident participants. And last, aligns with the key departmental objectives, Commissioner's Court's priorities, as well as the Harris County strategic plan. I think I've kind of hit that last one on the head a few times, but what we're going to do on all of these criteria is really look at how it fits in a very simple format of high, medium, and low. And as you guys get the presentation, you guys can see how we're going to go look at that evaluation criteria. I won't go through each of them individually here, but we do have an example that I'll go through next that will hopefully give you some color behind it. All right, so the first one is an example of the service enhancement request by Managed Assent Council, so MAC. Their services listed here under holistic defense, and they're looking to expand their immigration services. So you can clearly see at the first item, one of the criteria that's going to help us is how does it tie into a strategic objective or initiative? And it's listed out objective D, and D3, so it's very clear. It helps us fill out that portion of the criteria. Service enhancement requests. Now, this is where probably 60-70% of the criteria helps us. This is where you help outline the problem and you come up with the clear path to the solution and address how timely and critical it is to address the issue. And so this is where a lot of the items get addressed. And this one helps explain that they're looking clearly for an immigration attorney position. They're doing it so that they can provide immigration services. And the reason it's critical is because they have very short notice on immigration notice referrals. So they need to have an attorney available kind of at a moment's notice to be able to go and help them address the issue. And they're clarifying, which part of the population that they're going to address. They're looking for advocacy for indigent non-citizen clients. So it's kind of a good example of how it outlines those areas. Next is describing why the staff can't be existing staff can't be used. So again, one of the things that they've really honed in on this year to make sure that they do have staff attorneys, but that they need some to address those short-term needs because those staff attorneys do have a heavy case workload, and that they won't have time to quickly step away on these short notice items. The county's capabilities for implementation. This is one where we really make to ensure to see if we are the best positioned group to help. There's a City of Houston plus there's nonprofits, and so we want to make sure that really we're well equipped to come in and actually make a meaningful difference, or if it's better served to help use funds to go help in areas where we have better level of expertise. I described the fiscal need in a formula format. We talked about this one a little bit earlier, but really this is the one where it helps us and court officers understand what really is being asked for. So we'll very clearly lay out the need for one attorney position here and the cost of salary and benefits, and that there's a need for some non-labor costs. It is also really helpful to make sure that you have both pieces of it. Oftentimes we'll get attorney position, but like a position request, but there is a non-labor portion related to it. And so in this one, you can see that they've highlighted that they need additional license cost, legal license cost, as well as supplies and equipment. And last is the impact on performance measures. So being able to track, the benefit that you get from putting money towards this service request. So this is a really good example of an item, and this was actually approved at court, one of the major supplementals, but this is a good example of a good way to lay it out. So next, we'll go into the offsets. So the offsets is, as I mentioned before, it is 8% offset this year. So we're looking for 92% of your CLS target. And then OMB and OCA can recommend additional budget offsets based on any strategic plan items for Commissioner's Court consideration. And we have done this in the past 3 years I've been here. We've always done this. Oftentimes what we'll try to do is we'll look at county-wide areas and items to look at where we can contribute towards some county-wide savings, so that helps alleviate some of the burden. Also, we work with departments and help come up and vet some items as well to see if there's any specific initiatives or items based on things that we've learned from other nearby counties. And we work with departments to bring some of those opportunities up. So it's not something that we bring up cold to Commissioner's Court. We work with the department to identify them, get feedback, and their consideration. The last thing is that, this is the mandatory item as the budget SOP has outlined that Commissioner's Court has approved. If a department does not participate, Commissioner's Court will automatically reduce the budget department to 92% of its CLS budget. So it's essential that you go through the process and make the submission. As far as the offset evaluation process, this part is the same as last year. We're looking for kind of overall, we're making sure that the items that are submitted in good faith. And these 4 questions really outlined it in different formats, but just to make sure that the criteria is really clear. 1, is it reasonable? Are the discretionary items, can we verify them? Can we look at invoices and POs and have you actually spent that money in the prior year? Extreme reduction. Are you cutting a service beyond what something Commissioner's Court has clearly expected? So we want to make sure that you're not cutting a service that, as Commissioner's Court has recently just given you a service enhancement or a mid-year supplemental for last year, and then they're going to, if you turn around and try to cut that. I think that's also goes really in line with number 4, a good faith effort. To me, that's a bad faith effort. If Commissioner's Court had just provided you an enhancement request or a supplemental, to please not offer that up as a reduction. Contradictory offsets. So if there's something that is approved during the CLSS process, don't take that around and turn it and offer it up as an offset. Really, an offset is meant to look at what are areas that you could cut that would have the least impact on your operational budget. And the services that you guys offer to either constituents or internal stakeholders. Yeah, and I'll mention again here, just as I mentioned in the beginning, that we have provided the number in the OB SharePoint site where you access your 3442s. That is a number that you guys have that you guys can work with. So you have a number and target to work towards. Just know that there might be some minor changes that come through as a result of the May 14th court. Next. So we'll go through a quick example, just using our office, the Office of Management and Budget, looking at our finance and investment service. This is a good example where we've clearly identified what it is we're cutting. Our labor expenses is we've identified 3 positions here. We've taken into account both the salary and benefits costs, so it's a fully loaded value. We've identified the classification of all 3 positions, and we have noted that it is a funded positions. I know we go through an unfunded PCN exercise. We want to make sure that that position really truly is funded, so that there will be a true reduction. What can happen if you pick an unfunded position is that you might cut the position, but that's going to put you in the bind during the course of the actual fiscal year. And we've also identified some non-labor expenses. So fees and services for our Xerox machine, as well as an expiring contract that we're not going to choose to renew. And at the very bottom, you've got the total discretionary expense that was submitted, 846, and you can see that the number ties to that 8% target. So again, you will have that target that you have to work towards. So all of your different submissions should tie to your total 8% target. Next. Okay, so this is the new kind of something new to consider for this budget process, and it's the ranking and prioritizing of the service enhancement requests and the offsets. One of the consistent questions that we've gotten through the quarterly DPMs that are budget focused, as well as the budget hearings, you guys have heard I've heard the question over and over again. If the court officers are really curious to get the perspective of the departments of, if you had to choose, your number 1 service enhancement request, what would it be, and the why behind it? And similar question for the offsets. And this is to help with that process. So when you guys do your process of submitting the service enhancement offsets, you will be ranking them of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And this is intended to be additional data point to give a perspective to Commissioners Court offices as well as OMB and OCA on how you think about them and prioritize them. So from a service enhancement request, you would put 1 as the, your highest priority item. This is the one that if you had to choose 1 to get funded, this is the one that you would choose. And then from an offsets perspective, your number 1 ranking would be the one that has the least operational impact. So if you had to take one of your offsets, this is the first one you'd pick, and that's the one you want to list as number 1. So we want to provide as little disruption to the constituents or an internal stakeholder as much as possible. And this is to provide that perspective to court offices and to our office to let us know that this would be the one you had to choose. So it's a question that's happened and come up multiple times. So this is kind of something that we have implemented in the budget process. And you can see the ranking there. And you'll get an example of that as you go through the technical aspect of the training there as well. Next. Okay. So at this point, we've kind of gone through the high-level review of the process, and then the next step is the budget technical training process of it. So I want to pause here and open it up for questions. I know I've gone through a lot of content. So is there any questions about the process, the evaluation criteria, about any other aspect of the budget SOP that you think would be beneficial for the group to hear? And again, outside of this, there is budget office hours that we have. So if you have department-specific questions that you think might be just unique to your area, you can use those office hours in addition to just directly reaching out to your budget liaison as well. But I'll pause here and just see if there's any questions. Paul, are there any questions in the chat that I missed? See. Okay, now we are going to get into the technical aspect of the training. So if you're a department head or an executive, if you're not going to be the person that actually goes into the budget software and actually inputs the enhancement requests or the offsets request, this would be an opportunity for you to drop off. This is really the technical aspect of the training. Both Daniel and I will stay online and we'll help look at the chat. And if there's any additional questions at the end, we can help answer those questions as well. So with that, I will hand it over to Paul to go through and Ray to go through the technical training.
Thanks, Deputy Shaw. Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Fagan. I'm a Director of Budget and Performance in OMB. Welcome. Thank you so much for attending today's budget kickoff training for the budget process this year. As Boone was saying, just to level set, this really is a technical training on the budget software. So any elected officials or department heads, feel free to stick around if you'd like to, or you can drop. But what we ask is that you at least have someone from your team, whether it's a budget manager or a CFO, someone who will actually enter this into the budget software, stick around, learn from the training. But we're also recording this training and it'll be available on our SharePoint page a little bit later on. So if anyone on your team is unavailable to either see this training in person, we're going to be having office hours. Those office hours is an additional time. It'll be held on May 11th and May 13th. It's a reserved hour for you and your team members to come on. We'll go through the same demo that we're about to go through in a second. We'll go through it. You can ask questions about potential submissions. You can ask questions about ranking, which is a new feature this year that we will go through. But it's basically dedicated time. It will be question driven. So after we finish the demos, it's really up to you. So think about those questions in the next couple days or so. Bring them next week and we can go over them. So as I was saying, what we'll be doing is a demo of the two forms that we'll go through in our budget process. But what we'll ask you to do is please hold your questions until the end. So as you're walking through and seeing how we're inputting everything into this budget software, just think about those questions, reserve them to the end, and we'll walk through them. One big point I'd like to reiterate is that when you hit submit on these submissions in our budget software, the understanding is that this has been vetted through every level of leadership. So whether it's CFOs, department heads, elected official, everyone has reviewed it, has given the thumbs up on it when you hit the submit button. So that is one assumption, that when we receive these items, it's basically been vetted all the way through. And speaking of submission deadlines, our submission deadline for the entire budget process is going to be May 22nd. So that's Friday. So you have about 3 full weeks to work on this.